Welcome back. We already talked about types of clauses, so now we are moving on to types of phrases, specifically noun, verb, adjective, participial, prepositional, and absolute. So again, quick parts of speech review, just in case you need it. We know what nouns are. Adjectives describe nouns. Verbs can be action verbs or state of being verbs like is, am, are, was, were, etc. Adverbs describe verbs or adjectives. They can but don't have to end in ly. Prepositions are time, space, or location words like above, below, with, by, around, etc. And participles are verbals. They are verbs that look like verbs, but they're actually behaving like adjectives right now. So the word broken could be a verb if you have broken the vase today, but right now it's my broken heart, describing which or what kind of heart. Okay? So, with that in mind, let's go back to our chart. We know that when we have fragments, all fragments are either dependent clauses or phrases. Phrases have either a subject or predicate. They're the least complete. Okay? So they already can't stand on their own. And if they exist for a reason, usually to describe. Okay? So, here are some examples of phrases that have a subject or predicate, but not both. In 1969, man landed on the moon. This is an introductory phrase at the beginning of a sentence, and it shows when the dude landed. My sister, a former gymnast, is super athletic. Sometimes phrases are in the middle of the sentence, especially in a positive phrase like this one, describing the sister. Or hiding under the bed, my cousin jumped out and scared me. So this is saying, well, it's specifying like who is hiding under the bed. The cousin's doing it. Now today we're going to dig into 6 different phrase types, and here's the first 3. Here are the ones that I think are the easiest. First, a noun phrase is just the noun and the immediate words that describe just the noun. Now you might be thinking, hey, there was a noun clause too. But again, a noun phrase doesn't have a verb in it. So, the girl with the pink binder. This is my subject of the sentence. The girl is my main noun. All those other words are just articles and other parts of speech to describe the girl or the noun. And hey, look, there are no verbs in this noun phrase. Okay? I'm just trying to live my best life. Well, cool. My main noun is life. What kind of life? My best life. Noun phrase. No verbs involved. Okay? Now, the opposite is a verb phrase. Now, because it's a phrase with verbs in it, it's not going to have a noun this time. We are decorating the gym for the dance. Are decorating are my 2 verbs of this sentence. They go together. That's cool. Verb phrase. Might eat are more verbs. Now, in this second sentence, they might eat the cake, but I don't know for sure. There's technically 2 separate independent clauses in here, right? 2 separate sentences combined by a comma and fanboy's word. Not digging into that right now, but that's why there are so many verbs going on. That's why there's more than one verb phrase. Okay, so keep in mind that sentences can have more than one phrase in them, or even more than one phrase type. Finally, adjective or adjectival phrases. I've heard this pronounced a couple of different ways, and I've heard it said both ways, adjective phrase or adjectival. I'm not sure if it matters because I've seen such inconsistency, but hey, I'm just letting you know that there's both terms. The dude in the green shirt is my teacher. Which dude? This dude. Okay, these 4 words are describing the dude or the guy. Okay, so they're describing him. I watched a sweet documentary about what? Or about who? Jane Goodall. So the 3 words about Jane Goodall are all describing documentary. Now I started this for a reason. Technically, the word about is or can be a preposition. But right now, this isn't a prepositional phrase because it's describing the documentary. It's not going to a place. We're not going about a place. Okay? If that confuses you, don't worry about it. Basically, in this moment, the word about is being part of an adjective phrase. Okay. Cool. Now here are 3 more phrase types. The first, on this page at least, is a prepositional phrase. We already reviewed the word preposition earlier. A prepositional phrase, though, follows a typical formula. Usually a preposition, an article, and a noun or pronoun, or sometimes they'll skip the article and just do noun or pronoun. Here's what I mean. There's a lot of prepositions in song lyrics, so I stole 2. We're going to have a Disney moment together. Just look at the world around you, right here on the ocean floor. Around is a preposition. You is a pronoun. We've skipped an article in the middle. But look where around you. Oh, hey, look, I forgot one. There's another one, guys. At is a preposition. See, told you earlier there can be more than one phrase in a sentence. Okay. Same thing though. At the world and on the ocean floor follow the same pattern. Preposition, at or on. Article, the. And then noun or pronoun. Same thing in Pocahontas. I looked once more just around the river bend. Okay, around, preposition, article, the, river bend, place / noun. So, a preposition launches a prepositional phrase. That's your easiest way to notice them. Our next one, number 5 out of 6, is a participial phrase. Now, cute reminder, participles are words that look like a verb, but it's actually an adjective because they're describing. So a participial phrase will be a participle plus any words that accompany it. So students hoping to pass the test should study participles. Hoping is an ing word that could be a verb, but right now, the phrase hoping to pass the test is a chunk of words describing students. Which students? Okay, which students? The ones hoping they pass the test. So we're acting like an adjective. The word jumping could normally be a verb, but right now, it's an adjective. Which dog? The dog jumping up and down. Who's going to get a ticket? Anyone caught driving without a seatbelt. Caught could be a verb. Right now, it's describing anyone. Okay? So be a little bit careful with these in terms of differentiating in your mind. Is this a verb phrase right now, or is this a participial phrase? You know it's a participial phrase if we're in describing mode. These are not the main verbs of this sentence. Look, the main verb of this sentence was should study. Students should study. The main verb here was the word is. The dog is mine. And then here, the police will ticket. So again, you know it's a verb phrase if it's like the main verb of the sentence, but it's a participial phrase if it's in describing mode. I hope that makes sense. Now, our last phrase type is an absolute phrase. This one also has a very specific formula or recipe that it has to have. Absolute phrases have a noun and a participle and whatever other words that might go with them. Super important, guys. An absolute phrase is going to look like a dependent clause, but it's not. An absolute phrase is missing a real predicate or a real main verb. Let me show you what I mean. Our mugs now filled with coffee, we started studying. Guys, the real independent clause here is we started studying. This chunk at the beginning is an introductory phrase. And in here, we had mugs, noun, filled, participle, because it's describing the mugs. But there's no verb in here, no real verb, no main verb. This is not a dependent clause. It's just a phrase that includes these kinds of words, a phrase that meets this criteria. So it's an absolute phrase. All right. Same thing here. This is a shorter one. Hands shaking, the singer on stage took a breath. Hands, noun, shaking, participle, describing the singer. Okay, there's no real main verb in here. Now, here's an example of a longer one, and this is an absolute phrase at the end of the sentence instead of the beginning. The kids had eaten dessert first. How can I tell? Their faces smudged with chocolate. Faces, noun, smudged, participle. Smudged looks like a main real verb, but it's just describing the word faces. It's a participle. Okay, so on this page, when you're trying to identify these phrase types, you really got to look at formulas, and you have to pay attention to the verbs. Is this really a verb or just a describing participle? So basically, it's not that hard to identify different phrases, but you have to pay attention and you have to be detail-oriented. Okay? Now, that being said, I'm going to stand by my claim that this isn't that hard, but I'm also standing by the part where I said you have to pay attention. So, in the two words on stage in this sentence, the girl on stage is auditioning to be Jasmine. Like maybe their play is Aladdin or something. On stage is technically a preposition or a prepositional phrase, but grammar nerds are going to arm wrestle about whether this is prepositional or adjectival, because technically they're clarifying girl or describing girl or which girl. I know the word on is a preposition, and I know it looks like a prepositional phrase, but you can make an argument that it's an adjective phrase too. Here's a second example. The sentence, Brutus is funny. Noun, verb, adjectives. Adjective, singular. You know, people will arm wrestle over this one a little bit too, because you could say that is funny is describing Brutus, but it's a verb, so could it be a verb phrase? I'm not sure it's either. I think it's just three separate words. I don't think these two words necessarily make a phrase, but again, people will debate this kind of thing. And a third example is strolling down the garden path, we caught a butterfly. Now, we caught a butterfly is our main independent clause, and caught is my main verb. So strolling, not the main verb, okay? I would call this, well, So you might think it's a prepositional phrase because it's got down preposition, down the garden path, but the word strolling ruins that. Technically, it's describing we, because it's what we are doing, but you could also make an argument that it's an adverb phrase because it's describing where or when we caught the butterfly. So my point here is that some phrase types overlap. Sometimes they look like something they're not, and you have to be careful. Now on the quiz and test, we're going to try very hard to be very clear with our word choices and not give you a sentence that's confusing. But no matter what, even if we give you very clear-cut examples that are simpler than this, you have to pay attention to word choices. Which means we made it, guys. Those are the 6 phrase types we're focusing on today. And again, to review, you have complete clauses. And then in the fragment world, all fragments are either dependent clauses or phrases or just single words. Okay? Any group of words will be a dependent clause or phrase. And then we talked about these 6 phrase types that have either a subject or a predicate, but not both. So, it's practice time. Take a look at these 8 sentences and tell me if the bolded part is one of the 6 phrase types or if it's not a phrase at all, if it's actually a dependent clause. You might want to pause the video to think about it. And here are the answers. Number 1 is an adverb or adverbial phrase because it's describing where or when he earned 3 gold medals. Numbers 2 and 8 are both dependent clauses that start with a subordinate conjunction or awubis words. Number 2 starts with the word since. Number 8 has a clause that starts with the word because. They're not even phrases at all. Number 3 is a noun phrase, and it's the object of the sentence. Technically, my main object is, or my main noun is Sunday, but ice cream sundae, specifically the one with sprinkles. So all those words all describe Sunday, so they act together as the noun phrase. Number 4 is a prepositional phrase because of the word to. It's where I'm going. It's a location phrase. Number 5, Brutus read a newly released pirate book. What kind of book? This kind. These are adjectives describing the book. Number 6 is a participial phrase because it's a chunk of words that starts with a participle. It looks like a verb, but it's describing the phone screen that's cracked. Okay? The phone is not actively cracking right now or something. Number 7 is an absolute phrase. And remember, the absolute phrase has that specific formula it has to meet. It has a noun. It has a participle. And none of these are true verbs or predicate verbs. So it still counts as a phrase describing Felicia. Okay? Now, before we depart for the day, I wanted to kind of let you know, why should we even care about clause and phrase types? I know this might feel like a stupid thing to learn in school and it's just like a big labeling exercise, but it's really more than that. The reason you have to learn all this stuff is because it's going to help you as a writer. First, knowing these will help you if a sentence is complete or not. It's going to help you avoid fragments and avoid accidentally ending a sentence too soon. But it affects other punctuation marks, not just periods, especially commas and semicolons. For example, knowing whether or not a chunk of words is a complete thought or a independent clause can impact whether or not you can put a semicolon or a comma. You know, are you creating a run-on with this comma, or are you correctly putting a comma after an introductory clause or phrase? That's just one of many examples here. So basically, it helps you make strategic choices as a writer, both in your punctuation and your word choices. So we gotta care. Thank you very much for listening to this lesson about phrases. I hope it was helpful, and make sure you reach out if you have any questions at all.